Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So, Badram Karnebihi Shrunyama Devaha Badram Pashema Akshabihi Rejatraha Sthirairangayir Tushtuvam Sastanubihi Veshema Devahitai Yadayuhu Swastinaha Indro Vridrashavaha Swastinaha Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinaha Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Bruhaspatir Dadatu यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रक्षुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वदाम्ना अन्यांष्टहस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम् नारायणं गुणैः सर्वैरुदीर्णं दोषवर्जितं ज्ञेयं गम्यं गुरुंश्चापि नत्वा सूत्रार्थ उच्यते. So good evening everyone, and welcome to the third in the series on Brahmasutra. Hopefully over the next 3 months or so we will do about 15 to 20 sessions on Brahmasutra, because there is so much to be told, there's so much to be discussed, the philosophy of Vedanta and the philosophy of Badarayana or Veda Vyasa. So moving on to the first slide. Chitra, do you want to go on to the first slide, please? Yeah. So what we have been doing for the past 2 weeks is talking about the very first sutra, Veda Vyasa. First class, we spoke about the greatness of Brahmasutra. And in the second lecture, we discussed about the first sutra, which is Om Atato Brahma Jignasa Om. So then, therefore, study or inquiry into Brahman shall begin. Now, I want to remind you, or also remind you of a particular sutra that comes in the fourth Adhyaya, called Om Avrittihi Asakrit Upadeshat Om. So what Vedavyasa is telling us is Avrittihi. Avrittihi means repetition. Avritti means again and again. So what Vedavyasa is saying is the philosophy, the satsang, the sankirtan, the philosophical contemplation of the Supreme, do it again and again and again. Revise. Even if it is repetition, the more you revise, the more dhardiya, the more firmed up knowledge that one gets. So avrittihi asad upadeshat, krit upadeshat. Please revise. Why? The very last sutra of Veda Vyasa, that is the 564th aphorism of the Brahma Sutra, says Om anavrittir shabdat anavrittir shabdat. So what that means is, so look at 411 avrittihi and look at the last sutra anavrittihi. Anavrittihi means there is no return. Yeah, if you again and again do Brahma Jignasa, if you do again and again, you contemplate on the Supreme, you will reach a stage at the end, you will never return to samsara. Anavrittihi shabdat, anavrittihi shabdat. So that is such a beautiful sutra that reminds ourselves as to why we should revise again and again at the expense of repetition. So with that spirit, what I have done is I've requested Neetaji to give us a 2 to 3 minutes summary of all that we have done over the last couple of weeks around the first sutra and the significance of Brahma Sutra. So Neetaji, the stage is yours, 3 minutes.
Yeah, namaskara to everyone. Thank you, Babuji, for this opportunity. So to start off with, what is Brahma Sutra? Brahma Sutra is science of Brahman. So it forms a part of Prasthanatraya, which is Gita, Upanishad, and Brahma Sutra. So as Babuji mentioned just now, it's Badarayana or Vedavyasa who is the author of Brahma Sutras. So other names that you might come across for the same scripture is Vedantasutra, because it's a summary of the Vedas, or the entire Vedic literature is summarized. A critical summary is in this Brahma Sutra. And it's also a summary of Upanishads, Gita, Pancharatra, Agamas, and Itihasa Puranas. And again, just to repeat, is the central theme is nature of Brahman. It's so important, and that's why there have been many bhashyas written, and Sri Madhvacharya's bhashya is the 22nd bhashya of Brahma Sutra. Now, next thing is, what is the structure of Brahmasutra? How is it written? There are 4 adhyayas, and then each adhyaya is then divided into 4 padas, and each pada is divided into adhikaranas. Okay, so 4 chapters are Samanvaya Adhyaya, Avirodha, Sadhana, and Phala Adhyaya. So now, what is a sutra? And if you remember Madhuji's first lecture, it has to have 6 requirements, like very few words, free from doubts, meaningful, wide meaning, and no unnecessary details, and free from flaws. What this reminds me, I don't know if there are IT consultants or people here, is like a macro language or a software language. Very few words, very few letters in that language, and it still does the function or works. But we all can't understand it. Only people who know understand that language. So it's very similar to that. What's the approach to all these chapters? What is the main approach? How has the author approached this? Is having an objector's view. What is the objection? What is the doubt that is created in people's mind? And what's this next is a subject of discussion. So that then forms a subject of discussion. And then all the advantage accruing, that what are the pros and cons, and then the conclusion of that particular discussion is given in that particular chapter. So the first chapter, again, is about inquiry into Brahman. So the 4 things, what is called as Anubandha Chatushtaya, are the 4 things is, what are we discussing? Who is eligible for this knowledge, or who is eligible to understand or again this knowledge? Why do we have to do this? And what is the relationship between all 4? So what is being discussed is inquiry into Brahman. Who is eligible, or who is the adhikari of this knowledge? Is the devas, rishis, and manushyottamas. And why do we have to do this? To be released from the bondage of everyday life, or the samsara. And how can we do it? How can we do it? Know him, understand him, and obtain his grace. Now, I missed the last lecture, but I heard it, and it was a wonderful discussion on obtaining grace. There was discussion about how to obtain, and whether grace is important. God's grace is important for liberation. So I think we all agree that yes, we do need God's grace for liberation. And also Madhuji explained what Brahman means by etymological explanation, and also scriptural evidence. So that is where it was left at. I think that's a short summary of the 2 lectures that we've had. Thank you.
So Neetaji, that was very, very, very comprehensive. Thank you very much. So Chitra, if you move to the next slide. So so just to put today's lecture in context. So Om Atato Brahma Jignasa Om. Then therefore inquiry into Brahman shall begin. Who is this Brahman? Vishaya, doubt. Is it Vishnu or Jiva or something else? What is the subject of discussion? Brahma Shabda. So what we will do now is we'll take up this Brahma Shabda and explore this further. There are multiple layers and multi-level philosophical discussions that can be had here. So let's just take the word Brahman or Brahma. So the word Brahman in Sanskrit, particularly in Vedic philosophy, has several meanings, and it all depends on the context in which that particular word, or any word for that matter, comes in. So for example, Jiva is also called Brahma. So the objector's view, the Purva Paksha, is quite justified. He says Brahma denotes Jiva only. That is quite justified, because there's a Rudi Artha, the conventional usage of the term Brahma can also mean Jiva. So what is Brahma? We have seen that before. We've said Brihanto hi asmin gunaha iti Brahma. So that means that which is big, that which is superior, that which is high, that is Brahma. So if you look at Jiva Jata, that is the group of Jivas, if you look at Jivas, they are bigger than Jadas. We all agree that they are superior to Jadas because Jivas are conscious things, Jadas are insentient, unconscious, I wouldn't say unconscious, they just don't have consciousness things. So Jivas are bigger than Jadas. So Jivas are sensibly called as Brahman. Now, if you take Jiva Jata, the group of Jivas, again, the ones that have attained liberation, the ones that have, gone past samsara and attained moksha and they're on the other side of the Viraja Nadi, they are the Mukta Jivas. So we will all agree now, among the class of Jivas, the ones that have attained moksha are superior to the ones that are in samsara. So Mukta Jivas are also called Brahma. Now we all know Chaturmukha Brahma. It's a very popular, we all know who Chaturmukha Brahma is. He is also called Brahma. Why is he called Brahma? Because he is the highest among all Jiva Jatas. He is the highest among Jivas. He is called Jivottama. So Chaturmukha Brahma, because he is highest among Jivas, is also called Brahma. Now, if you go into Vedic scriptures, Lakshmi, the Shri Tattva, the Chetana Prakriti, that is a conscious being behind the material universe, whom we call and worship as Lakshmi, she is also called Brahma. Yeah, she is ever liberated. There was never a point where that Lakshmi was in samsara. Up to Chaturmukha Brahma, everybody is in samsara. Lakshmi never in samsara. She is all pervasive along with Vishnu, but she is dependent on Vishnu as a sentient being. So that is the ontological status of Lakshmi in Vedic philosophy. Yeah. Now, Lakshmi is a dependent sentient being, although she is liberated and all pervasive. Look at Vishnu. Vishnu is also called Brahma because he is even higher than Lakshmi. Why? He is the highest. He is ever liberated, never was in samsara. He is all pervasive and he is an independent, swatantra, sentient being. So he is also called Brahma. Now look at Vedas. Even Vedas themselves is called Brahma. Why? Because it is a large body of text. That is why it is also called Brahma. In fact, there is one portion of the Vedas called Brahmanas, as you know, Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishads. So Brahmana means Brahma Ana. That means further discussion of Vedas is Brahmana. Okay, so Brahmana is also a name of a portion of Vedas. So there are at least 6 different meanings for Brahma in Vedic philosophy and in Vedic scriptures. So the Purva Paksha is quite justified in raising his arms and saying, hello, Brahma denotes Jiva only, because the conventional sense, Brahma equals Jiva. Okay, so this forms the background to what we're going to be discussing in the subsequent slides. Chitra, if we move to the next slide, please. So I want to give you an overview. This is just an idea, a glimpse of linguistics, phonetics, linguistics, and the science of language, how language develops, and so on in our Vedic philosophy and in Sanskrit as an ancient language. Now we will be dealing with this further when we come to Shastra Yonitvat Tattu Samanvayat. So those are the 2 further sutras that come next. So we will be dealing quite a lot with this, but I just want to give you a hint here as to what this means. So our Vedic philosophers have gone to they've gone to the root of the problem of the science and development of language. So we all know that there is an object and an object somehow has a name, and we somehow denote when I say mobile phone, somehow I link that mobile phone name to an object which is rectangular in shape and which is constantly connected to the internet, and I'm spending most of my time looking at this. So that is how I associate the word mobile phone with an object. Okay, so our Vedic philosophers have actually asked this question: what is that relationship between a word and its meaning? Yeah, word, object, and its meaning. So what is the relationship? So that relationship between a word, meaning, and the object is called vritti. It is also called shakti in jargon, in Sanskrit jargon. It's called vritti. Okay, so vritti is that connects a word and an object. Okay, so you get a meaning when I say the name mobile phone. So in all languages, universally, in all languages, people use two styles in which they talk and converse when they communicate. So something called Mukhya Vritti and something called Lakshana Vritti. Okay. Mukhya Vritti, again, there are three classifications. There's something called Rudi, something called Yoga, then there is called Yoga Rudi. And I'll explain this with examples. So Rudi means conventional usage. Conventional usage means, for example, if I say the word river in English, river means it's a river. There is, you can't split that word river into something. River is a conventional usage to say that this is river. But if you go to Sanskrit, it's more complicated because we all know Sanskrit is the greatest language that ever exists on earth. Nobody can argue with that statement. So the same river, for example, I would say is Nadi. Nadi means river. So why is something that flows is called Nadi? So there is an etymology for that. Nadanyati iti nadihi. So that means Nadan means sound. So the meaning Nadi means Nadanyati iti nadi. That means that which flows, and when it flows, it makes a very pleasant noise. And that is why it is called Nadi. So Nadanyati iti nadi is, nadi means that nadi, we have split that word open and we are understanding the meaning. So that splitting of the word is called yoga. You take the word, split it into various parts, and each part gives you a meaning. So that is yoga. So in Sanskrit, we are all learning Sanskrit. So let us take the word gata. Gata is a conventional usage. It is a Rudi. Gata means pot. Yeah. So we all know gata is pot. Now let us take Padmanabha. So when we say the word Padmanabha, of course we are actually talking about Vishnu himself. But why are we giving him a name Padmanabha? So Padma means lotus, Nabha means navel. So he who has lotus in his navel is called Padmanabha. Yeah. So you split that Padmanabha into two, Padma and Nabha. So that is a yogika word or yoga word as it's called. Now, sometimes you can use both. You can have yoga and Rudi. For example, let us take the word Pankaja. Okay. Pankaja means we all know is lotus. Okay. So that is in conventional usage. When I say Pankaja, I mean it's a lotus. But when you look at it from a yoga angle, because our language is highly evolved and complicated, you actually split it into Panka and a Ja. Panka means mud. Ja means that which is born in the mud. What is born in the mud? A lotus is born in the mud. You can also, a frog can also be born in the mud. That is not the indication. That Pankaja is a Mukhya Vritti there. So it says Pankaja means it is a lotus. So Pankaja in a conventional usage becomes lotus. And when you split it open in a yogic way, it also becomes lotus. So that is called Yoga Rudi. Now there is another higher level of Sanskrit literature or understanding Sanskrit is called Parama Mukhya Vritti. So Mukhya Vritti means it is the conventional meaning of the word. Parama Mukhya Vritti means the highest meaning of the word. Yeah. So that is how the Vedic Sanskrit evolves and goes to higher levels. So Parama Mukhya Vritti for Brahman, as I told you before, Brahmeti Bruhanto hi asmin gunaha. So Parama Mukhya Vritti means that Brahma, the highest meaning of that word Brahma is Bruhanto hi asmin gunaha iti Brahma equals Vishnu. So that is another concept. So I just want you to keep this in mind as we move along. So Vritti, Mukhya Vritti. Rudi, Yoga, Yoga Rudi, Parama Mukhya Vritti. Then the layers gets complicated. So there is something called Maha Yoga, there is called Vidvad Rudi, Avidvad Rudi, and it goes on. So what I'm trying to imply here is the Vedic language is quite complicated. You cannot just literally look at a word and say that is the meaning for this. You have to use Nirukta. Yeah, you know what Nirukta is? It's a science of etymology. There are two types of Niruktas. The one that is currently used is called Yashka Niruktam, and there is an ancient one called Vyasa Niruktam. So much of the Vedas, the language of the Vedas, the way we understand it is using what is called Vyasa Niruktam. And there is another body of text called Brahmatarka, which was also composed by Veda Vyasa to understand the language of the Vedas. So as I said, it is highly evolved and the meanings are hidden in various levels. So that is the Mukhya Vritti, or the ones that when I say Ram went to the temple, that is a Mukhya Vritti, because you have three words and you link them together, you get a sense. But when I say Gangayam Goshaha, That is, so this village is on the river Ganges. When I say that, it doesn't make sense, because how can the village be on the Ganges? So you will have to understand it differently. It implies that the village is on the bank of the river Ganges, is how you understand that. So that is called Lakshana. So this is metaphorical. So the language, the metaphorical language, the metaphors that are used, the similes that are used in various languages, including Sanskrit, is taken as Lakshana. So that is called Lakshana. So then it gets even more complicated. There are various types of lakshanas, jaha lakshana, ajaha lakshana, jahad, ajaha lakshana, and so on in Vedic philosophy. But I just want you to remember these concepts, because we are going to go to the next slide, Chitra. So the next slide then hopefully will give you an idea as to where am I getting at. So remember our Purva Pakshan, remember our objector. He has said, you know what, from a conventional usage, Brahma denotes Jiva. So Jiva, Brahman is Jiva. So when I say Atato Brahma Jignasa, I just mean Atato Jiva Jignasa. So, or you could say Jiva cha Atma cha Brahma. So Suresh ji, for example, last week, he brought about that concept, I am Atma Brahma. How do you look at those kind of words? So these becomes important, because I think over the last 6 months, we've had enough of basics and foundations. I felt that maybe I need to step up a little bit more and give you some subtle, complex, complicated concepts to make you understand how Vedas should be read and interpreted. So let us dive into this slide. Now, Jiva is Brahman, is what the Purva Paksha says. And why does he say? Because he says, look, there is evidence in this in the Vedas. There are a lot of evidence in the Vedas to say that Jiva is Brahman. So I don't have to do this Brahma Jignasa at all, because I am already Brahman. So there are famous Vakyas, as it said, Aham Brahmasmi. And there is another one called Tattvamasi. And there are so many other, there are about 5 or so these kind of main Vakyas, as they are called. Now, let us take Aham Brahmasmi and Tattvamasi and see what it means. So Aham Brahmasmi and Tattvamasi basically are the same side, or the two sides of the same coin. They just mean the same. Aham Brahmasmi is first person. I am Brahman. Okay. Tattvamasi is second person. Yeah, that you are that. I am Brahman. Yeah. So Aham Brahmasmi and Tattvamasi are the same, two sides of the same coin. So let us just go into Aham Brahmasmi here, because this is interesting. And I think another 5-10 minutes, it will be well worth thinking about what Aham Brahmasmi actually means, because it becomes relevant for the first sutra. So you have to go, where does Aham Brahmasmi come? And I've told you so many times, so when you look at a word, when you look at a combination of words, in Vedas, you just don't pluck them as though you pluck a flower from a tree. You have to actually understand those three words as they appear in the Vedas, and in what context they appear in the Vedas, and also the etymology of the words. So those are all three important rules that one needs to apply to understand this. So let me read this particular place where Aham Brahmasmi comes, because I'm quite convinced many of the folks who use these three words routinely and colloquially to come up with a particular form of philosophy probably are not familiar with the background or the context in which these three words come. So they come in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. They come in the first Adhyaya, yeah, Avyakrata Brahmanam. And it's a beautiful section. To understand Aham Brahmasmi, the first context is you have to understand what is the very previous verse in that particular Upanishad. So it goes like this. Tad ahuhu yad brahma vidyaya sarvam bhavishyantaha manushya manyante kimu tad brahma aved yasmat tat sarvam abhavat iti. So that is the sentence before that. And I've given you an English translation so that we don't spend too much time on that. It says, given that self-fulfillment is attained by knowing Brahman, men like us would like to attain men like us who would like to attain self-fulfillment ask themselves, what is it that Brahman itself came to know, whereby it has become perfect and self-fulfilled? So this is a very deep philosophical question. It is basically pointing the finger at God himself, asking him, how did you become God? How did Brahman become God? Yeah, is what this philosopher is asking this question. Tad Brahma, how did he become? Okay, so the very next paragraph actually gives a whole lot of philosophical discussion on it, which is beautiful. I'll just read it because I can never be tired reading this particular paragraph from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So it says, Brahma va idamagra asi tadatmanam yeva avet aham Brahma asmi iti tasmat tat sarvam abhavat tad yo devanam pratyabhutyata sa eva tadabhavat tata rishinam tata manushyanam तदेतत् पश्यन् ऋषिः वामदेवः प्रतिपेदे अहं मनुः अहं सूर्यश्च इति तदिदम् अपि एतर्हि य एवं वेद अहं ब्रह्म अस्मि इति स इदं सर्वं भवति तस्य न देवाश्च न अभूत्या ईशत आत्मा हि येषां समभवति अतयो अन्यां देवताम् उपास्ते अन्योऽसौ अन्यो अहमस्मि इति न स वेद यथा पशुः स देवानां यथा वै बहवः पशवो मनुष्यं भुञ्जुः एवं एकैकः पुरुषो देवान् भुनक्ति एकस्मिन् एक एव पशाव आदीयमाने प्रियं भवति किमु बहुषुः तस्माद् येषां तन्न प्रियं तदेतान् मनुष्या विद्युः. Okay, so this is the whole paragraph talking about aham brahmasmi. What a detailed, clear, scientific, rational philosophy should do is, it should not just pluck this aham brahmasmi, put it aside and say I am Brahman and start flaunting this around and come up with a wrong philosophy. What you need to do is, you need to see the aham brahmasmi as it exists in this Upanishad. So what is this actually saying? So let's go back. The previous verse, here's how did Brahman became Brahman is the question. So the immediate answer here is Brahma va idamagra asit. Before creation, Brahma was the only person who was there. And when he was there, he always knew him as Aham Brahma Asmi. So what does Aham, Brahma and Asmi actually mean? So this is how you look at this word. So in a colloquial sense, if you look at it, Aham Brahma Asmi means I am Brahman. But that is not the language of the Vedas. Yeah, the language of the Vedas is ancient, 3000. It's eternal, of course, but you're looking at 5000, 6000 years ago. What was the meaning of Aham and Brahma and Asmi in that? And one of the key messages there is every word in the Vedas is etymological. Everything needs to be broken. Remember, we did a topic on Chandas in Vedas. What is Chandas? Chadayanti iti chandamsi. That means Chandas means Vedas. So Chadayanti means it needs to be broken. It needs to be split open and then you see the meaning. So that is the secret language and sacred language of the Vedas. So Aham, for example, here actually you know what it means. Aham is a name of God, is a name of Brahman himself. He himself is called Aham. Why? Brihadaranyaka Upanishad itself gives a reason. Tasya Upanishadam Ahariti, Tasya Upanishad Ahamiti. So Brihadaranyaka, there is internal evidence in the Upanishads itself to say that Aham is a secret name of God. Let's go to Aitareya Upanishad. There it says Sahovacha Tvameva Janiyam, and it goes on Uvacha Prano va Aham Asmi. I am that Aham. Okay. Then you look at the etymology. So etymology of Aham, Heya means Hatum Yogyam. Heyam means that which can be discarded, that which can be thrown out. That is called Heya. Okay. So Heyam means that which can be thrown. Hanyamanatvat Ham. So that is the etymology of the word. Ham means that which can be thrown. So the opposite of Ham is Aham. Yeah. Aheyatvat is called Aham. So Aheyatvat Aham Namas. That means that thing which cannot be discarded. The undiscardable is the quality of that Brahman. Why is he undiscardable? Because he is inside us as Paramatma. So this is this body. Inside this body is just Jiva, and inside the Jiva is the Supreme Being. Can we get rid of, can we ever exist without the Supreme Antaryami in us? That is impossible. So he is undiscardable, and that is the reason why he is called Aham. Now Brahma, we have done the etymology of Brahma. Brahma means he who is all pervasive in time, space and guna. So this Aham and Brahma essentially captures the quality of the Supreme. He who is inside us is Antaryamin, and who is outside is all pervasive being. Who is that person? Yeah, so there is a lot of description about that in the Vedas. Antarbahishta tat sarvam vyapya narayana stitaha. That is the definition of Narayana or Brahman or Vishnu. It says Antar Bahishta Tat Sarvam. He is pervading everywhere, outside and also inside me. He is Narayana. Okay. Asmi, look at the word Asmi. The etymology of Asmi is Sarvada Asti Iti Meyam. That means he knows himself as Antar Bahishta Tat Sarvam always. So Brahman is always aware and conscious of its eternal existence and perfection. So those three words, Aham Brahmasmi, is so profound with philosophical significance, describing the qualities of the Supreme. It is not saying you are Brahman. It is actually talking something entirely much more at a deeper philosophical level and giving us the grasp of who this Brahman is. And then this Upanishad then goes on to say that whoever knows the Supreme Being, that he knows himself as Aham Brahmasmi, eventually he will also reach his fulfillment, i.e. he will also reach his moksha. His moksha essentially is the attainment of his fullness. Yeah, there are different cups of different sizes, and you fill them all with water, and each cup has a different volume of water. But when you look at an individual cup, it is full in its own right. So are the jivas and their blissful nature. So it opens up deeper levels of philosophy. So we will have to inform our ill-informed Purva Paksha. Hello, Aham Brahmasmi here actually means the Supreme Being. It does not mean I am Brahman. I hope I didn't drag on a bit, but I was able to give you that essence of the greater depths of Vedic philosophy and Vedic language. One should not take words in the literal sense. So moving on to the next slide, Chitra. So now what happened? So he says, yes, Atato Brahma Jignasa. We have now given an answer to our Purva Paksha and said, no, Brahman is not Jiva. The Vedas do not say this. No, because Brahmana Lakshanamaha Om Janmadhyasya Yataha Om. Look, so Veda Vyasa has immediately gives a definition of this Brahman, who this Brahman is. He is not Jiva. No, he is not Jiva. He is not Lakshmi. He is not Moksha. He is not Chaturmukha Brahma. That is not what I am talking about. I am talking about the Supreme Being. How? In the very next sutra he says, Brahmana Lakshanamaha Om Janmadhyasya Yataha. So moving on to the next slide. So this is a deeper question. So what the Sutrakara is doing, what Badarayana is actually doing is helping us out is how to comprehend the Supreme Being. Yeah, it is all well and good, going to temples, looking at deities, worshipping and so on. But how to comprehend the infinite perfection or the Sarva Guna Purnatva of Brahman? How is it possible? How can the finite, a limited finite being like me, how can I know the infinite? How can the finite know the infinite? It is a big, deep philosophical question. How can a finite know anything about infinity? If somebody asks me what is infinity, I can only say no, because I have not seen the end of infinity. You cannot describe infinity. So this is the problem of philosophy. This is a problem of Vedantic philosophy as to how do you define that Brahman? How can you show that he is a perfect being? What is that perfect being? How can me as a human being comprehend this perfect being? Okay. So to ask that basic question, this is a basic fundamental question, Badarayana is giving us an answer, Brahmana Lakshanamaha Janmadhyasya Yataha. So let's split that word. Asya Janmadi Yataha. Asya means this Jagat, this universe. Janmadi means, Janma means creation. So Adi means and others. So creation and others. Yataha. Yataha means from whom. And we have to include these other words to get the meaning. Tat Brahma. So Asya Janmadi Yataha Tat Brahma. So this Jagat creation from whom it came, that person is called Brahman. Okay. So by using this very simple formula, Sutrakara or Badarayana is giving us a hint as to how we can reach or touch that perfect infinite being. Look at Purusha Shukta when we did the first verse. Sahasra Shirisha Purushaha, Sahasrakshaha, Sahasrapad, Sabhumin Vishwato Vritva, Atyadishta Dasangulam. So that word there, Atyadishta Dasangulam, becomes very important and we have to apply it here. Why? Because Atyadishta Dasangulam means, and we discussed this in the first lecture on Purusha Shukta, Dasha means infinite, Shata means infinite, Sahasra means infinite in Vedic language. So this Purusha Shukta is saying that Supreme Being is infinitely different from all the things that is there in existence. He is infinitely different from Jivas and he is infinitely different from the material universe. Now it is to bring home that idea about Brahman that he says Janmadhyasya yataha. Why can I create the universe as a Jiva? I can't even bake a cake properly, let alone creating the universe. So we need to be a little bit rational and reasonable about this. Am I Brahman? Can I create the universe? Impossible. I can't create the universe. So Sutrakara is saying because he has created the universe, it gives you an idea that this being must be somebody who is so superior and different from us. Look at Brahmasutra in the 4th Adhyaya. There is a very important sutra in the very last pada called Jagat Vyaparavarjam. That is another exclusive role of Brahman is Jagat Vyapara. Jagat Vyapara means the creation of the universe and everything is a specific portfolio of Brahman. Yeah. So when now we understand that the sutra, that the Badarayana is giving this formula for us. If somebody on the street asks me, what is your Brahman? What is his definition? You say, my Brahman is Janmadhyasya yataha. He is the creator. He is a Brahman not just because he is a creator, but I use this formula to understand how big he is, because unless somebody is huge and big and has infinite knowledge and so on, how can you create this huge universe? We do not know where the universe began. We do not know what is the middle of the universe. We do not even know where the end of this particular universe is. This is such a vast universe. Unless he's an infinitely powerful being, how can somebody create such a big universe? So it is for our with our limited consciousness, we can understand that the Supreme has got this capacity. Acharya will say in Dwadasha Stotra, Bahuchitra Jagat Bahuda Karanat Parasaktihi Ananta Gunaha Paramaha. And I've cited this so many times because it's very relevant. Because every time we see this multitude universe, we should always remind ourselves, so this universe is so beautiful and this so great, then how great and beautiful must be the creator. We should remind ourselves all the time. And I also am not exhausted in putting this statement from Jayatirtha when he says, and this is very relevant to this sutra, of creator of the universe as one definition of Brahman. Janmadhyasya yataha iti bhagavata sutrakarena jagat udayadi nimitta karanatvam parasya brahmano lakshanam abhihitam nacha jagat satyatamantarena tadvastavam sambhavati. Okay, these are very powerful words from Jayatirtha when he says, when Badarayana Vedavyasa has defined Brahman as he who is the creator of this universe, then it implies that that creation is real. Okay? It has to mean that you cannot have a great artist but then say that his art is false. It is illogical. So this is a powerful statement for us to think about and comprehend and see if this is something that makes sense in our own intelligence, because we are all rational beings. We are rational beings. We are professionals. We are highly educated. So we need to analyze and comprehend this concept. If there is a creator and he has created a universe, is that universe illusory universe or is this a real universe? It's a big question for us to contemplate. So each one of us can all make our own individual studies and see what appeals to us. So moving on to the next slide, Chitra. So now I want to slightly change track. So we have said this universe, Janmadhyasya yataha. So he who is the creator of the universe is Brahman. But actually, you know what? Our Vedic philosophy talks about infinite universes. This is just one universe that we live in. Our Vedic philosophy talks about There are lots of other universes. In fact, it says there are infinite universes that come out from the spores of Brahman. Spontaneously, they are flowing out. So there are infinite universes. And I was doing some research when I was thinking about this. So there is this concept called universe versus multiverse. We call this place as universe because we think it is only one place where everything exists. But now there is an evolving concept in theoretical physics talking about multiverse, that there are multiple universes that exist out there. You know, I Google New Scientist. There are lots of articles in New Scientist talking about the multiple universe. There is a very interesting book called The Hidden Reality, where the physics, the quantum mechanics of multiple universes, and how it is not a theory, but it has to be a fact. All these points are argued. My point here is this concept is not unique to the scientists of modern times. Our Vedas have always spoken about this. Our Puranas have always spoken about multiple universes. You can find beautiful verses in Bhagavatam, for example. You know, I put the 6th canto, 37th verse. I'll just read the last line. Saha anda koti koti. Okay, it says Anda means Brahmanda. Brahmanda means this universe. So Bhagavata Purana says koti koti, crores and crores of Brahmanda is there. And that is why I am also called Anantaha. It says in Bhagavata Purana. Every universe is covered by 7 layers, each 10 times greater than the previous one. There are innumerable universes besides this one. And although they are unlimitedly large, they move about like atoms in you. Therefore, you are called unlimited or Anantaha. What a beautiful statement from Bhagavata Purana. Now, look at another statement. It says, Sankanam Paramanunam Kalena Kriyate Maya Na Tata Me Vibhutinam Srujato Andani Kotishaha. Even though over a period of time I might count all the atoms of the universe, I could not count all of my opulences which I manifest with an innumerable universe. So Bhagavata Purana also is telling us about, he is not just Janmadhyasya Yataha for this universe, he is a Janmasyasya Yataha for infinite universes. There is a very interesting work called Garga Samhita. Some of you may be very familiar with that. That gives a beautiful metaphor, and I was quite fascinated by it. It says like Brahmandam Eka. So it says Brahma Andam Ekam Janati Yatra Jatas Tata Janaha Mashakashta Yatamsta Audhumbara Phale Eheshuvaihi. So I put the figure of the Udumbara fruit. Udumbara is basically cluster figs. Okay. So this Rishi is saying, you know, these andas, these multiple universes, to me, they look like these clusters of figs on this tree. And in each fig, there are these mosquitoes inside those figs. And the jivas are like that. They are in each figs like mosquitoes, and there are multiple universes where jivas are going through their transactions in life. So I just thought I'll share this interesting slide that talk about multiple universes, which is not an unfamiliar concept in Vedic philosophy. Our theoretical physicists are just beginning to scratch the surface. So let's move on to the next slide. So the cosmic activities of Brahman. So now we have understood he is the Janmadhyasya Yataha. He is not just the creator of one universe, but there are infinite universes that come out of his pores. So what does he actually do? What is his cosmic activities? Yeah. So when you look at a sutra, there is a Vishaya Vakya. So that means there is a key verse from the Upanishads that is taken, and that Badarayana then discusses this. So the Vishaya Vakya for this particular sutra comes from Taittiriya Upanishad, and most of you would be familiar with it. Yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhisamvishanti tad vijijnasasva tad brahmeti. So the Upanishad defines this Brahman, tad vijijnasa, know him, tad vijijnasasva tad brahma iti. He is that Brahma. Who is that fellow? Yatova imani bhutani jayanti. Bhutani means, bhuta means all these jiva jatas, and it also means this, the panchabhutas. So from whom all these things came? Yena jatani jivanti, and they are all maintained by him. Okay, they live, they're sustained, they're maintained. Yet prayanti, they get dissolved. Abhisamvishanti. Abhisamvesha is a very interesting word. Abhisamvesha means holy communion with the Supreme. So when do you have the holy communion with the Supreme? Only in moksha. So this verse basically is giving 4 cosmic activities of Brahman. So I put a question mark there. Is the cosmic activities of Brahman only 3 that we are all familiar with, which is creation, sustenance, and dissolution? Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara. If this is only 3 cosmic activities, the Vishayavakya Taittiriya Upanishad is actually listing 4. Look at Shvetashvatara Upanishad. It says, Samsara Moksha Bandha Hetuhu. He who is responsible for samsara, moksha, sthiti means our maintenance, and bandha means our samsara. Look at Skanda Puran. We have dealt with this before. Utpatti sthiti samhara niyatir jnanam avruttihi bandha moksha cha purushat sa harire karat. So that is a clear definition in Skanda Puran talking about the 8-fold cosmic dispensation of Brahman in his creation. Rig Veda, and I've just picked up 3 verses from Rig Veda. They are so beautiful, those verses. Yavo tridatu prithvyam utadam eko datara bhuvanani vishwa paro matraya tanva vridana nate mahitvam anvashnuvanti nate vishnoho jayamano najato deva mahimnama paramantamapa. The last one, yo naha pita janita yo vidata damani veda bhuvanani vishwa Yo devanam namada eka eva tam samprashnam bhuvanayanti anya. So these are all profound statements from Rig Veda talking about the various cosmic functions of the Supreme. So on the right side, I put this Brahman. He does 2 things. He does something to jadas, the matter, and he does something to the jivas. So he brings them into creation. So let us see what that actually means. Maybe in the subsequent week, we'll talk a little bit more. It will be like a revision of the previous session we had on creation, but it is well worth going back and talking that with some additional concepts. So in matter, what does Brahman do? Srishti, he brings creation into being. What does that creation mean? How that the 3 gunas of Prakriti, how do they mix? We can deal with that next week. So that is the creation. Mula Prakriti per se is never created, it is uncreated. So in Vedic philosophy, what does creation actually mean? It means the mixing up of the sattva, rajas and guna and the transformation. It is the cause to effect, the transformation of the material thing that is there, that is creation. Sustenance is maintaining that. Dissolution we know is that gross then again becomes a subtle. Controlling means just then you make sure that that particular material thing does its function. So those are the 4 things that Brahman does to matter. What is it to jivas? Creation. What is creation for jivas? Linking them with material bodies is their creation. Because we all know jivas are uncreated. For them, linking them with their bodies is creation. Sustenance, maintaining that link is a work. Dissolution, when the gross body, we die and we born, that is the gross body goes, we still maintain our subtle bodies. In the next birth, we acquire another gross body. So that is that giving up our gross body is samhara. Control, our daily affairs of life that we are doing. All the karma, the whole concept of karma yoga comes from the niyamana or the control. So these are all the cosmic activities of Brahman. What else Brahman does? And in our series on the journey of souls, we have discussed this in detail. We talked about he gives ajnana to the jivas, he gives jnana to the jivas, he gives them bondage, and he also releases them from bondage. So obscuration, enlightenment, bondage and release. That is ajnana, jnana, bandha and moksha. So the cosmic dispensation can be 3, but actually it is 8. When you look at matter and jivas, there are only 3 things in existence we all know. Matter and jivas are the ones that are in creation. So what is happening to them? For jivas, there are 8-fold cosmic dispensation. For matter, there are at least 4 cosmic dispensations. So these are all the activities of Brahman. So when I say Janmadhyasya Yataha, all these concepts should go into our head. Now, as I usually do, I put a question mark here in the bottom right-hand corner. So all that we have been discussing so far is this great supreme being, this person, this personal Purusha, the Purusha Shuk, the Purusha of the Purusha, the Krishna, Vishnu. So we have been talking about him. Now, I've just put a question mark and asked the question from an Advaita philosophy perspective. Let's ask this question. Yeah, Brahman is nirvishesha. He is nirguna. He is nishkriya. So these are all axioms in Advaita Vedanta. Nishkriya. He does not do any activities. He is a still, pure, still consciousness. He is nishkriya. So the question there comes is, how can such a Brahman create the universe? If Vedavyasa, who is incarnation of Vishnu himself, he is telling about himself that he is a Janmadhyasya Yataha. If he is Nishkriya, how can he create the universe? Okay, so this is a philosophical point for discussion. And as I usually say, we can do our own individual studies and then come up with what appeals to us. So I just want to introduce two concepts here. So there is something called Tatastha Lakshana and something called Swarupa Lakshana. So what is Lakshana? Lakshana means that which defines that particular object. Lakshana means that is a defining characteristic of that particular substance or an object is called Lakshana. Okay. So when I say Swarupa Lakshana means it is an intrinsic characteristic of that object or a being. So that is called Swarupa Lakshana. When I say Tatastha Lakshana, Tatastha means temporary or an accidental characteristic. So the philosophical arguments there is, from an Advaita Vedanta point of view, they would say that this Janmadhyasya Yataha is not a Swarupa Lakshana of Brahman. It is an accidental characteristic of Brahman. Brahman is essentially Nishkriya, but this characteristic of describing him as Janmadhyasya Yataha is accidental characteristic. That is called Tatastha Lakshana. And the philosophy is interesting and you can explore, and it would give two examples. This is called Kakavatt Devadatta Griham. So that means Devadatta is a guy who has a house. And then there is a crow that is sitting on the house. So some fellow, Simhadatta, is asking, where is Devadatta's house? So this person is saying, you know that crow that is sitting on Devadatta, that is Devadatta's house. So the crow there is an accidental characteristic of the house. So here, the house is Brahman, the crow is the creatorship of Brahman, which is an accidental or a temporary characteristic. Or another way of thinking is, it's called Shaka Chandra Nyaya. So Shaka means branches, and then there is Chandra means moon. So if a baby asks, Mummy, where is the moon? The mother will say, you know what, look, there are those two branches. Can you see those two branches? And in between there is a white spot. That is the moon. Okay, that is called Shaka Chandra Nyaya. So the Advaita philosophy will say that is the creatorship of Brahman. So this is a temporary accidental characteristic. Brahman actually does not create the universe. It is a superimposition of Brahman due to Maya. Okay, so that is a philosophy. It is an interesting concept. Do your own reading. So moving on to the final parts of slides. So now is there an alternative definition of Brahman? So there is this problem that comes. So if Janmadhyasya Yataha is actually an accidental definition of Brahman, it is not actually his characteristic. Then the question is, if that is the case, is there an alternative definition of Brahman? Okay. The same Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a very famous verse in the second Adhyaya, and it goes like this: Om Brahmavid apnoti param tadesha abhyukta satyam jnanam anantam brahma yo veda nihitam guhayam parame vyoman so ashnute sarvan kaman saha brahmana vipaschita iti. So this the first verse is amazing verse, but there is the definition of Brahman called Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Okay, so this is another definition of Brahman. So the reason why I put this is, if somebody asks you who is your Brahman or who is your God, you can say my God is Janmadhyasya Yataha, or my God is Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. That is the definition of my God. Okay, you can confidently say that. Why? Because let us take Satyam, Jnanam and Anantam Brahma. Satyam, you split it open. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma. Brahma is whom? He who has these three characteristics. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. Anantam is easy. Anantam means infinite. So he is a source of infinite bliss of moksha. And he is an infinite being. We just read in Bhagavatam, Anantaha, because he is there in all, he is in infinite universes. Jnanam, he who confers knowledge to the souls. And a corollary of that is he is the author of ignorance and bondage for souls. And himself, he has infinite knowledge. So from Jnanam, you get all these concepts. The word Satyam is very interesting. So Satyam is, if you take Rudi, which is the conventional usage, in conventional usage, Satya means real. Truth is Satyam. Yeah. But that is not that is, yes, Rudi is one. But the language of Vedas is far more complicated, far more interesting, and far more depths of philosophy. It will be unfortunate if we just take Satyam at its face value and say it is truth or reality and then get on with it. No, we need to open Satyam. Okay. How do you open Satyam? You break it into Sat, Ti, and Yam. Sat means nirdushta. Nirdushta means no doshas. That means he is infinite auspicious attributes. Ti means jnanam and Yam means ananda. The arrows have moved a little bit on the right. So now you take the word Sat, then Sat again opens up into 8 different ways. Sat Bhava. Yam becomes Yapayati. Yapayati means he who gives. So Sat Bhava Yapayati. Sat Bhava means creation. He who gives creation to Jada and Jivas. Satta means existence, Yapayati, who he gives reality and existence to Jiva. Sada means Nasha. Nasha means he who destroys beings. Yat Sat Tat Yamayati, he who maintains becomes Sat. Sadal Yapayati. Sadal means Jnana, Yapayati giver. Avasada, Ajnana, Yapayati. It also means Bandha. It also means Moksha, Yapayati. So the word Sat itself opens up of this 8-fold cosmic manifestation of Brahman, which is what was described by Vedavyasa in Janmadhyasya Yataha Om, which I described in the previous slides. Okay. Now, Chitra, do you want to just scroll down just a little bit? I've got a question because I've been talking a lot now, so I'm going to just rest for 2 minutes. I'm just going to ask a question. So when you think about previous slide, stay in the same slide. Yeah, that's fine. So when you talk about Sat, so Om Tat Sat, for example, is the name of God. Yeah, Om Tat Sat. So I'm going to ask a question. Om, what are the components of Om? How can you split or divide Om? So can I have some contributors, please?
Sthiti Samhara.
Sorry, Sheilaji, do you want to repeat?
Srishti Sthiti Samhara.
Yeah,
and
correct.
Waking stage, deep sleep, dream stage, and deep sleep stage.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. So yeah, anybody else wants to contribute there?
Madhu, Suresh here. Does it go as U and Ma for the 3 Vedas? And then that expands into Vedas.
Yeah, so that is also true, Suresh. Thank you very much for that. So the very word Om, as Sureshji and Sheilaji contributed, it has various connotations. You can take Om as a single letter, or you can take Om as 2 letters joined together, or you can take Om as 3, or you can take Om as 4, or you can take Om as 8. Okay. So the 3 components that Sheilaji said was Akara, Ukara, and Makara. Srishti, Sthiti, Pralaya, and she also spoke about Jagrati, Swapna, and Sushupti. And Sureshji spoke about the Rig, Yajus, and Samaveda. So, but if you look at Om, actually has got 8 components: Akara, Ukara, Makara, Nada, Bindu, Kala, Shanta, Atishanta. These are the 8 components of Om described in Vedic philosophy. So do some research on that. And why is Om got 8 components? Because this cosmic Brahman has got 8 cosmic dispensations for souls and in its creation. So when you say Om, besides all the signs of Vedas in it, you should also remind yourself of that number 8, because these are the 8-fold cosmic dispensations, and Om also has got 8 components to it. 3 is correct. 3 is the conventional usage of Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara. But going to further depths and levels, it becomes 8. Yeah. So moving on to the last slide for today. So this Satyam becomes very important, because the Satyam is the same as Janmadhyasya Yataha. And if you look at Chandogya Upanishad, there is a very beautiful thing. It actually splits Satyam. Brahmano Nama Satyamiti. So that is easy. Brahmano nama satyamiti. This Brahman is called Satyam. Okay. So now look at Chandogya Upanishad. Tani hava etani trini aksharani sat ti yam iti. Next line. So the Chandogya Upanishad is saying he is called Satyam because he split it into three: Sat, Ti, and Yam. And it goes on to describe what Sat is, what Ti is, what Yam is. So the internal evidence for what Satyam is has to be found within the Upanishads. What we should not be doing is to take a very superficial kindergarten meaning of the words. When I say Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, I just don't mean reality. I am actually meaning lots of other things with all the evidences within the Chandogya Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and various other places. So this particular verse, for example, it says, Tat yat sat amrutam ata yati tat mrutyam. Okay, so in this Upanishad it says Sat means immortality. Ti means mortality. Martyam. Martyam means mortality. Okay. Yad. Yam means yamayati. That means that which controls. So this Chandogya Upanishad here is taking Satyam. You know who that Satyam is? Satyam is the name of that Brahman who is actually controlling everything in Amrutam. Amrutam is what? In Moksha. And Martyam is what? Martya Loka, in Samsara. So this Brahman is one who actually controls everything, not only in the material universe, but also in the trans-empirical existence. That is why he is called Satyam. So that is another beautiful meaning for the word Satyam, which defines Brahman's cosmic dispensation. Look at Purusha Shukta, verse 2. Purusha eva idam sarvam yadbhutam yaccha bhavyam uta amrutatvasya ishanaha. Okay, that word is so important there. Uta means he is above. Amrutatvasya, in Amrutatva, in Moksha, Ishanaha. Ishanaha means he is the Lord. Okay, he is a Lord in the Moksha state, and he is also a Lord in the material existence. So Satyam becomes Janmadhyasetaha, not just a reality. We are not talking about real, unreal, something in between, illusion. No, we are talking about as a characteristic of Brahman. Look at, we don't have to go very far. Go to Bhagavatam. Go to the very first verse. How can people make such blatant blunders when they interpret the Vedas and the Upanishads? Look at Bhagavatam. What is the very first word? Janmadhyasya yataha. The second sutra of Vedavyasa is exactly the first couple of words of Bhagavatam. Janmadhyasya yataha anvayat itaratashcha arteshva abhignaha swarat tena brahma hrudayadi kavaye muhyanti yam surayaha tejo vari mrudam yata vinimayo yatra trisargo mrusha damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi. So Satyam, Param Satyam, Parama Satya. He is the greatest being. Satyam Param Dhimahi. This is the same as Gayatri. Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Satyam Param Dhimahi. And Janmadhyasya Yataha is the very first verse of Bhagavatam. And look at that fourth line, Nirasta Kuhakam. Okay, we'll deal with it next week, and that is what I want to start off next week, about those three verses in Bhagavatam, which actually captures the spirit of Brahmasutra, the spirit of Janmadhyasya Yataha, and the cosmic dispensation of Brahman. And Vedavyasa in Bhagavatam has clearly says Nirasta Kuhakam. What does Nirasta Kuhakam means? Kuhakam means illusion. Nirasta means never, no. So Srimad Bhagavatam in the very first verse talks about the greatness of this being who is the creator of the universe, and he is saying Nirasta Kuhakam. Guys, this universe is real. This is not an illusion, because this is created by this being who is Satyam Param. So Dhimahi, meditate on him. Okay, so that is the essence of how we need to approach the Janmadhyasya Yataha. So what I want to do next week is we would dwell with a little bit more in detail about this whole Shrishti Karta and what is it that creation, what comes, how the matter evolves and how the jivas evolves, what is the purpose of creation, why God has to bother with all this and so on. We have dealt with this about 4 or 5 months ago, but I want to come back to it with some newer ideas and newer philosophical concepts. So Krishna Pranamastu, and I'll stop there. I think I kept to my time. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhu. I think quite a lot of things we learned today. What about, one question is from me itself. This thing about Aham Brahmasmi, that's a very new sort of, concept, because until now we were thinking Aham Brahmasmi means like I am Brahman. And so is this quality of Brahman is what described as Aham Brahmasmi. And that means that is very common to both, all the three, isn't it? Vishta, Dvaita, Dvaita, and Advaita, because it is not exactly Agam Brahmasmi, it is about a quality. So that Agam Brahmasmi doesn't belong only to Advaita then. It belongs to all the three.
Absolutely. So I think you're right, Sudarshan. There is this artificial differentiation. So let me go back to it. So just bear with me when I get into the background of it. Okay. Veda is akhanda. Okay. It is one body of text. Anantavai Vedaha, everything is infinite. Vedas are infinite. It is one big volume of text. In that Vedas, every letter, every sound, every word of the Vedas is true. Okay. This is the fundamental Vedantic position of many acharyas. Okay. That every word in the Vedas is true. Okay. There is no necessity to divide the Vedas into two, called Tattva Vedaka and Atattva Vedaka. This is a concept that is unique to Advaita Vedanta. Vishishta and Dvaita do not take that approach. Advaita Vedanta has divided the Vedas known to themselves. On what authority, on what rules that they have divided, I do not know, nobody knows, but they have divided that into Tattva Vedaka and Atattva Vedaka. So Atattva Vedaka means does not give you the Tattva, does not give you the truth. Tattva Vedaka is that portion of the Veda that gives you the truth. What is the Tattva Vedaka? Pancha Mahavyakyas. Take the 5 verses. Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, Ayam Atma Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, so on and so forth. Take those words and they are the Tattva Vedakas. All others are Atattva Vedakas. That is their approach. Take the approach of the other schools who would say, why divide? Where is the authority to divide? Every aspect, every word in the Veda is true. It is just that we have to find what the truth in it is. What we should not do is have a preconceived idea and read Vedas that support your preconceived ideas. You should take Vedas as it is, as how Prabhupada writes his Bhagavad Gita and says Bhagavad Gita as it is, rather than putting your ideas. So that is the view of the other acharyas who have taken this. So in that sense, for all of us, the Pancha Mahavakyas are not only Tattva Vedakas, even for us it is Tattva Vedaka. So are all other words in the Vedas. Is Tattva Vedaka. So it is all about interpretational nuances and niceties that actually brings about these philosophical discussions. So I hope I was not controversial, but I'm just giving you a background as to why certain schools have taken this view. But actually, Aham Brahmasmi is important for all of us, but we look at it from a slightly different approach. So from my perspective, when I see Aham Brahmasmi, I know Aham is a name of God. Brahma is a name of God. Asmi is a name of God. Okay. Aham. Why is Aham a name of God? I've given you what are the qualities. Aham means aheyatva, something that cannot be undiscarded. He is my antaryami, so I can't undiscard. Brahma, we all know. Asmi is he knows. Brahman always knows he is infinite and he is always antaryami of everything else. I know that is Asmi is also a name of God. So for me, Aham, Brahma and Asmi are 3 names of God that describe his qualities. Whereas in Advaita school, Aham Brahmasmi means I am Brahman, because they have to come with their Brahmatmaikya philosophy. So they read it like that. So there are differences in the approaches, but it is important for all of us. Now, when we talk about Aham as a secret name of God, go to Bible. In Bible, for example, in the Old Testament, not the New Testament, if you go to Old Testament, and I've described this before, there is a dialogue between Moses and the fire in the bush. So the Supreme comes as a fire behind the bush. Moses sees the fire. So he has to go to the Pharaoh. So he asks the fire, what should I tell to the Pharaoh has sent me? He said, tell him, I am has sent me. Is the literal word in the Old Testament talking about I am, Aham, as a secret name of God. Is except that that particular group don't know what I am actually means. They have to come to Sanskrit to understand I am equals Aham. Aham equals Aheyatvat Aham Nama equals undiscardable equals Antaryamin. So that is how we read our philosophy. So even in other religions, I am is a secret name of God. Aham is a secret name of God. Tasya Upanishad Ahamiti. I am not saying that. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is saying that. Aitareya Upanishad says, Prano va ahamasmi rishehe. Aitareya Upanishad says, my name is Aham. Yeah. So these are all the interesting bits of it, but I went a bit long, but just to summarize, all three schools of Vedantas is important. It is important Vakya, but we approach it differently. There is also another view saying, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Jiva. No problem. You can say, I am Jiva. I am different from this body. Prabhupada, for example, in his books talk about Aham Brahmasmi in that view. He says, I am spirit soul. I am not this body. Fine. But you should not read that into the particular Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where I've given you a whole paragraph of actually describing that Aham Brahmasmi comes twice in a particular concept. Of course, I didn't have time to go through that verse in detail. Maybe sometime in the future we can do that, because every line there is important and it describes about, say for example, it talks about Rishi, Devata, and it talks about Manushas. It is talking about Jivas there. Yeah, there are all sorts of things that one can pick up from that verse. But yes, it's important for all three of us. Thank you. I went on a bit longer. I hope it makes sense.
Good, boss. Yeah. Anybody, any other questions, please? Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I take that people are okay with the topic today, and we'll give Madhu a big hand. Thank you, Madhu, for again a wonderful lecture, and we'll all see you next week. Yeah.
Thank you, Madhuji.
Thank you, Madhuji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madhu.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Madhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.